garden opened in 2014. So it's not something that's been in place for decades. And we opened it initially as free grief therapy. So my husband died in 2013, and we had been married for 36 years, 8 months, and 22 days. So when he died, our sons and nephews and my niece Alexandra, we decided to build this garden as a memorial. And it made sense for two reasons. One is Charles had introduced me to gardening back when we had our children. So we have three sons. We had the twins first while I was in law school. And that first year, I nursed them. And so when I graduated, they were 13 months old. We were starting to buy baby food. And he said, "Oh, sweetie pie, we don't know who's bottling that. We need to grow our own food." And I looked at him and thought, "You're such a freak," because, I went to Columbus School for Girls, went to Wellesley College, I have my law degree. I don't know who you think has time to be growing food. And he said, "Sweetie pie, gardening is like parenting and pastoring. They all require the same daily attention to detail with the same posture of humility, head bowed, body bent. And people who don't have time to garden probably don't have time to parent," which was a really different kind of perspective. And so I thought, okay, we'll try that. So that was how even though my dad always maintained an immaculate lawn and we had beautiful flowers, we didn't really grow food per se. So that was sort of my intro into organic gardening. So we almost always had a garden, and it was great, it was convenient. And as the children got older, because when Damon and Charles were 2, we had our third son, Evan. And ultimately we ended up homeschooling them, and we were also running our own business. And so having the garden was a time saver as well as an economic bit, because growing your own food really is like printing your own money. So that was sort of the backstory. So when Charles died, building the garden seemed like the perfect memorial. And the place that we chose to do this was in the rear of our church, the Church of Christ of the Apostolic Faith, which also made a lot of sense because this is a church that was founded over 110 years ago by descendants of formerly enslaved Africans in America. And my sons and nephews are 5th generation congregants. So that also just was sort of perfect synergy there. And then we began doing some research on the community, because in my real life, our principal job as management consultants, we started this business back in 1986. And we do organizational development and training, but it is hinged on, and it's derivative of demographic research and statistical analysis. So when we did just a cursory overview, because you can be part of a community and not really know the community statistically. So when we pulled up the data from the USDA Economic Research Service, it identifies that zip code as a low-income, low-access urban food desert, meaning 33% of the households are at or below the poverty level. 13% don't have access to a car. And the closest supermarkets are 4.3 miles away, and they are Trader Joe's and Whole Foods. In 2013, and we opened the garden in 2014. So in 2014, around February, I guess, we went to the Board of Trustees at the Church of Christ of the Apostolic Faith and said, pitched our idea, basically. We said, we'd like to do this garden, and we would like to have an on-site farmer's market. And given the demographic data, we think this is a classic win-win kind of synergetic relationship. And the board gave us permission. And so there was just an empty field behind the church. Part of it was known as Hardy Park. And after one of our former pastors, but there was a lot of unused space. And so the garden started off at about 3,000 square feet, and we're now at 5,000 square feet. And so we broke ground in June of 2014. And so we started with an empty field. The great thing was, because that area had never been used. We didn't have to deal with soil remediation. We didn't have any issues about prior industrial use. And so my sons, my eldest sons, Charles and Damon, and my nephews, David, Samuel, Joseph, and Benjamin, built 40 raised beds. I bought about 700 feet of untreated lumber, and they built the beds. We lined them with cardboard for organic weed control. And then that first year, we bought 40 tons of organic soil. Kurt's brothers gave us a great deal, but it was still super expensive. I did not know how expensive organic soil was. It turned out to be worth every penny, but it is not cheap. And then we planted about 3,000 seeds and 100 live plants. Our plan from the beginning was for the garden to be not just organic and clean, but biodiverse. So we grow vegetables, fruits, herbs, and flowers. And so that way we have lots of pollinators, which increases our yield. Excuse me, my allergies are awful. We also wanted the space to be aesthetically pleasing, and which is why we have that gorgeous wrought iron fence as opposed to a chain link fence. And so that's how we started. And we wanted it to be the real surprise bonus, the serendipitous aspect of this relationship with the Ohio State University has been the access to faculty research, and students. And so, as you mentioned, the farm bot that's just been installed, one of our volunteers, who I'll admit for the first year I thought was a kid, I thought this was a student, and I was telling him every week, "You're doing such a good job, so consistent." And then after about a year, he said to me, what would you really like to see happen in the garden? I said, Damon and Charles told me about this farm bot. I'm not a science tech person, but I Googled it and wow, it's really amazing. And that's what I'd like to get. And that's what we put in this grant. And he said, well, how would you feel about me writing a grant to get one? And I said, Chris, that's a lot of work writing a grant. And he said, the class that I teach. And that's when I realized he was an instructor at the College of Engineering. Yes.
Smart guy.
Yes. So, so he's actually Dr. Chris Reckley. So Chris wrote the grant, and excuse me. And what's really significant about that, sort of when you break these pieces down, a big part of the challenge for lots of community gardeners is that you're doing this community food security work almost like as a second gig, right? So it's another job. And so there are time constraints. And usually organizations that can afford a grant writer, those are not our organizations, right? Because you usually have to pay a grant writer. So this person comes along who's an instructor at the Ohio State University College of Engineering. And he doesn't just come and do work. He actually bend his back and works in the garden. He then uses his resources and writes a grant, which of course being written by a PhD in engineering has a good chance of being awarded.
Right.
He then takes those grant dollars and brings his students. So his class has been meeting at the garden this entire semester. Those students not only developed the programming for the farm bot, but they're also developing the curriculum that we want to use for this summer day camp. STEM to STEAM, it's all in the garden. So by bringing these kinds of resources into this space, so the fact that someone other than me, Damon, and Charles wrote the grant, someone other than me, Damon, and Charles did the planning, someone other than me, Damon, and Charles actually built and installed the farm bot and the solar panels that are going to power it, and someone other than me, Damon, and Charles wrote the curriculum. That's money. That's the equivalent of money, because that's a huge amount of time that has been saved. And time, as everybody who's self-employed knows, time is money.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Time is money.
Big time.
Yeah. And so having that, so we're now at this beta testing stage with the farm bot, and it's amazing. It's I encourage people to come out and see that as it's developing, and watch as we get ready to build the hoop house. The farm bot's gonna be inside the hoop house. So all that's amazing. But what's also amazing and deeply pleasing to me is this work has happened and it didn't require my time. It didn't require Danny and Charles's time. And so being able to tap into the resources of the Ohio State University as a land grant institution, that to me is an ideal and replicable example of community and college partnerships in which there's some mutuality of respect. It's not a missionary college. Frequently you see the academy coming into communities to help, but they're actually instructing and guiding and driving, as opposed to asking the community, what is it that you need? So I've been very pleased